Whatever their philosophy is what you're going to get. It's not going to be the same school by school or class by class. So you're getting really the philosophies, values, spiritual beliefs of your teachers taught in the classroom. Even if it's not direct, it is indirectly going to come out through what they're teaching.
Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. I am back with Monica Swanson, and we are talking about homeschooling and her new book called Becoming Homeschoolers. We will put links in the show notes, of course, to where you can find this book. It's an excellent book. It says, give your kids a great education, a strong family, and a life they'll thank you for later. And she talked about that in her first episode, just her boys now, her three oldest are adults, and the legacy that she and her husband have been able to leave for them, and that they already plan to homeschool their kids. I mean, that says a lot about her raising of them and her husband's raising of them, and how they really did have a great impact on them. So we're going to talk more about those things today. But before we do, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, BJU Press Homeschool. If you're looking for a great Christian homeschool curriculum for any grade, any age, any subject, check them out at bjupresshomeschool.com. And they are amazing. They will walk through your homeschool journey with you. And if you're not sure what you need, call them up, talk to one of their consultants, and they will help you figure out what it is that you need. So bjupresshomeschool.com. Monica, welcome back. Let's talk about some of the reasons for homeschooling, because I know that, again, if there's people who are maybe considering homeschooling, they're like, I'm not sure that this is the best fit for my family. And they really they can't pinpoint specifically the reasons why homeschooling is right for them. Yep. Talk through some of the maybe best reasons, maybe like the top 5 reasons that you have for home educating.
Yes, I love this. And I have been encouraged to hear from a lot of readers, especially readers who are already homeschooling, who said they needed this because maybe they were hitting burnout. Maybe they were questioning, maybe my kids would do better if I just sent them to a traditional school. And after reading this section, they were like, I was re-energized. I was reminded. I'm sticking with it. This is worth hanging in there. But, typically if somebody asks me why I homeschool, I think of all the warm fuzzies. I mean, I think of, like we talked about in the last episode, the fact that my 4 sons are best friends, from the almost 25-year-old down to the 14-year-old. They go on road trips every year together. They love each other. The fact that I talk to my boys every day. We have a really tight family. To me, that's at the top of the list. Like their faith, the fact that they all have a solid biblical worldview, that nobody deconstructed, everybody is doing really well. Those are the things I think of. But I know that there's parents out there who are like, I need to know more. I need more facts. And so I did a lot of research, and I included on my list of 20 good reasons to homeschool things like the fact that homeschool students consistently outperform traditional school students in SAT tests. Yep. The fact that colleges are now seeking out homeschoolers because they are proving to be self-directed learners, involved on the campus, all the things that a college would want. There are things like, homeschoolers are good at time management. They're ready for the real world because they've grown up living in the real world and observing what adults do. So they're prepared for the real world. But again, my top of my list would be faith, family, the fact that my boys have been able to pursue their passions and interests and be really well-rounded. And a couple of them, are pursuing sports really seriously and have that opportunity. So you asked for 5. I think I gave more than that.
You can give more than that. You can keep going if you want to. We've got lots of time.
Well, yes. I mean, I guess I would say if there's anything else I'd like to highlight, probably just I mentioned it, but the fact that they're prepared for the real world. I loved that my boys had a chance to do internships their freshman year of high school, that they had a chance to really get to know the topics that they were interested in. I think so many kids rush through high school. They have to commit to a major in college. You and I kind of talked about that before this. They're not ready. They haven't had the experiences to know, and now they feel stuck. Now they choose a major and they may never even work in that major. And now they are in debt from college and they never use. So it's like that whole real world experience is really hard to put into words until you've seen your kids do it and you see them grow up and mature and be really ready for what's next.
Yeah. It's funny. You said faith and family, and, we just had, celebrated Independence Day. And oftentimes you'll see people with the t-shirts that say faith, family, and freedom. And I thought that's a great slogan for homeschooling. I never thought about that until you just said that, but I thought that's perfect because it really is faith, family, and freedom. It's being able to instill God's word and truth into the hearts of our kids. Yeah. It's family and the relationships that we have with one another. And then it's the freedom to be able to allow them to become who God's created them to be and explore life. You know, you talk about internships and things like that. I mean, that's such a great opportunity our kids have to figure out, what do they like? You know, how many kids go to college and say, I'm going to go major in this particular area, and they get into it. They're like, nope, I hate that. And they've spent a whole year or 2 or 4 studying something that they then realize is not something that they really want to do.
Right.
But like you said, they don't have the opportunity when they're in middle school and high school. Typically, if they're in a classroom, they don't have time.
There's no margin. There's no margin. Speaking of which, I'll mention one other thing on my list that I think has really been helpful. Assuming that people listening might be sending this episode to your friends who maybe don't always listen to this podcast, but are thinking about homeschooling, that maybe they've mentioned it. So one thing I really think is important for people to consider is the fact that we have, you know, what people are saying is an epidemic in our country, in the world right now with kids and anxiety and depression. And we know that this relates to the use of technology and cell phones and social media. And I'm going to say across the board, research is finding that homeschoolers are getting more sleep, an average of 90 minutes more sleep per night, which they need desperately. They less anxiety, less depression, just so much healthier. And that's going to solve these problems that we see in our world where, you know, kids are up all night on social media because they feel all these pressures at school, and then they go face their friends. And it is such a mess out there. You can solve a whole lot by bringing them home, by giving them the sleep they need. I loved finding, actually, my boys loved that I found research that melatonin, that, you know, the chemical that we really need for good sleep, actually shifts during the teenage years, and it's released later, actually into the early morning hours. So kids go into their deepest sleep right about the time kids who go to a traditional school have to be up and out the door.
Wow.
And so the fact that they have trouble falling asleep at night is somewhat due to just this shift in melatonin. And so how great, though I try to keep my boys on a good schedule, I wake them up in the morning, they're not sleeping till noon, but if they need that extra sleep, as homeschoolers, they can sleep extra, and that is so helpful for their mental health, for their physical health, for their growth, for everything they're doing.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you about that. Like, were you one of those moms who just let your kids sleep until they wake up, and then here's the things you need to do throughout the day and get it done? Right. How structured were you with them?
Right. Well, I was always kind of having that inner battle that I mentioned in the last episode where I love a structured day, But no, I think I was pretty reasonable. I would let them sleep, but by about 8 o'clock, I would typically, if they were still asleep, I'd be like, you know, unless something had come up the night before and we were all out late. So I would get them up, and the older boys were pretty self-directed in that they'd get up, do their devotions, and start school. My youngest needs a little prodding, a little nudging. And then, of course, the third son, because he's a competitive surfer, he would often be out the door really early to surf, sometimes come home, take a power nap, and then start school about noon. Yeah. So had to be flexible with some of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I can't imagine getting up that early and going out in the water and,
I know,
and surfing.
It's painful for me as a mom.
So crazy. It's so funny. I can't not think about Bethany Hamilton and her story and her going out and surfing and, you know, her mom. I mean, I don't know if that was, I know it's a true story, but in the movie, you know, her mom says something like, well, we could stop homeschooling you, you know, and she's like, no, because she has the freedom to be able to surf in the mornings and the afternoons whenever she wants. And so,
oh yes, my boys do appreciate that when it comes to their sports.
Yeah, for sure. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. Have you tried CTC Math yet with your child? Here's a testimonial from another happy homeschool mom. Amber said, I'm absolutely thrilled with CTC Math. It's a rare find that I've used with my children for more than 5 years now. I have 6 children using CTC Math, and each child has found it easy to navigate and very applicable. Thank you so much for all that you are doing in providing quality math lessons for my children. If you're looking for a great online math program, visit ctcmath.com. That's ctcmath.com. Are you looking for a homeschool curriculum that goes beyond textbooks and truly engages your children in the joy of learning? Apologia's award-winning curriculum is written by homeschool parents to specifically meet your needs and captivate your students with hands-on activities and experiments that make learning unforgettable. With an easy-to-follow, open-and-go format, Apologia takes the stress out of planning and provides a simple roadmap that can easily be tailored to your family's needs. Explore live classes or self-paced courses designed to accommodate every student's unique learning style. Elevate your child's education, spark their curiosity, and nurture a lifelong love for learning with Apologia. Discover Apologia today at apologia.com. We are back with Monica. Let's talk about some of the things that homeschoolers get to avoid, because you talk about this in your book. And I think oftentimes we talk about like the benefits of homeschooling, but we don't always think about the things that we avoid from putting our kids in traditional school.
I love this. I loved researching this. Many of us think of avoiding things like the social pressures, think about things like the things that are, especially now. I mean, for anyone listening that's like, well, I went to public school and I did fine. I just have to say the world is changing.
Yeah.
Literally week by week, it is changing. So even if you came through just fine, don't think your kids are going to have the same experience. So that's my big warning. But I think of them avoiding so many of those things that have crept into our school system all the way down to the elementary years. I probably don't even need to name them. But when I talk to people, one of the top things that comes up is school violence. Parents are terrified about the school shootings. And, I try to be a realist and say, listen, it's a very low percentage chance that any kid going to school is going to be a part of one. But you know what? They all have to go through active shooter drills.
Right.
That's pretty traumatizing in itself.
Right.
I remember doing the earthquake drills and that freaked me out.
Yeah.
So an active shooter drill, I can't imagine having to practice that in school. So you get to avoid all of that. Bullying's awful. And homeschool students, most of the bullying happens either on the school bus or sometime in the school day or on the way home or something related to school. You get to avoid that when you homeschool.
Right.
Exposure to drugs and alcohol. Of course, homeschoolers may be exposed somewhere else, but for the most part, you're pretty safe keeping your kids home. And the list goes on. Teaching of evolution as fact in the classroom. Systemic racism, however your teachers are teaching, whatever their perception is, whatever their philosophy is what you're going to get. It's not going to be the same school by school or class by class. So you're getting really the philosophies, values, spiritual beliefs of your teachers taught in the classroom. Even if it's not direct, it is indirectly going to come out through what they're teaching. I remember that in school. My teachers just kind of chatting on the side, and pretty soon they're talking about whatever their wacky beliefs are. And your kids are just sitting there taking it in. So so much you can avoid by keeping your kids home.
Absolutely. I oftentimes hear people talk about, well, bullying still happens in homeschooling and things are still taught in homeschool co-ops and things like that. The difference is if your child is in a co-op or some type of a homeschool program and they're being bullied or other kids are being bullied, you as the parent have the freedom to take them out and put them in, because it does happen. And more, as you're talking about the world changing, the homeschool community is changing very rapidly. And there are some good things about that. There are some not so good things about that. And so because of COVID, so many people have brought their kids home. And so these, what were oftentimes, they were once solid Christian conservative homeschool groups are not so much that anymore. Some still are, but they have to be very intentional about being that still.
Yes.
But there are, my girls take classes, just a la carte classes. My youngest is taking sewing and, self-defense and
there we go.
Beauty basics class this year.
I love it.
And geography. Like those are the only classes she's taking. They're all just electives, but that's because I want her to be able to have interaction and fellowship with these other kids. Yes. Anyway, it can happen where these things, our kids are exposed to the things that we're trying to pull them away from.
Absolutely.
But it's not like they have to go to this particular school and they have to have this particular teacher and the parent has no say in it. Because that's the school district that you're in and that's the teacher they're assigned to.
Exactly.
If it's not working for them, pull them out.
Absolutely. In fact, when I asked my son, Luke, who is the competitive surfer in the family, what he most was happy to avoid. The first thing he said was, I'm so glad that I've never felt stuck. And I was like, tell me what you mean. And he's like, well, I just look at these kids and they all have to go to whatever school they're zoned for. They sit in a class that they're assigned. They have no choice in it.
Right.
And they have to study the things that everyone else is studying all day. He's like, I can't even imagine feeling stuck. He's like, at least at home, I can do my school outside. I can do school inside. I can choose what I'm focused on. Sure, there's a few core subjects I have to scratch off my list, but then I get to choose the things I study. So I love hearing that from him.
Yeah, it's tough. Looking back into my years of schooling, my middle school year at 7th grade, there was a girl named Maria who was a bully, and she threatened me and bullied me. She never touched me. But I was terrified. I remember being just terrified to go to school because I never knew if she was going to try to touch me or do something, if she's going to hit me across the face. I didn't know. And it was terrifying. Yeah. So I would get to school literally right before the bell rang, and I would leave as soon as school was over because I was so afraid of her. And I just think, man, that was a horrible way to live.
Right.
And I'm thankful that we can pull our kids away from that and that they don't have to experience those things. So
exactly.
Oh, goodness. Let's talk, talking about kind of the middle school years, talk a little bit about those middle school and high school years. And I think it's interesting because a lot of parents kind of go one way or another. Oftentimes parents will put their kids in school for elementary and then they'll say, we'll bring them home to homeschool them in the later years.
Yeah.
Or they'll do the reverse and they will homeschool them in the early years, and then they will want to put them into, wait, did I just say that backwards?
I'm not sure, but I know what you're saying. They either start them at home and then send them.
Right.
Yes, or send them and then plan to bring them home.
Yes. Yeah.
Totally. And it's just better to just keep them home. I mean, this is such a great topic that I think we could all sit around and chat about.
Yeah.
I think at one point, people would suggest, well, I'll send my kids to school and bring them home when things get really a little trickier. By middle school, lots of things coming into the school. And I'm like, no, those things are coming into the school earlier and earlier.
Yeah.
By kindergarten, many schools are exposing kids to, stories of same-sex marriage. They're introducing kids to all these concepts. They've got their pride weeks and their all the things. Yeah. That's not reserved for middle school or high school.
Right.
They are teaching those kids younger and younger.
Yep.
So with that, but in the book, I believe that I state, if there's one time I encourage people to homeschool, it's middle school, because I take some time in that chapter. In fact, there's a section, the middle section of the book is preschool to college. So whatever age your kids are, it's a guidebook. It's talking about what they need, curriculum. It's talking about everything they need from preschool to college, wherever you find yourself or whatever you're stressed about. And I take some time in the middle school chapter just to hang out and chat about middle school. What's going on in middle school? Yeah. Partly because I just have a heart for those sweet, awkward, funny, confusing years of middle school. I just look at my boys with their, their long limbs and they're trying to figure things out. Yeah. And so I'm like, what's going on? Let's look at what's going on in physically, emotionally, spiritually. Puberty is a huge factor. So if there's ever a time that's really helpful to just pull your kids out of all the crazy and just give them a good education and a lot of love and support and freedom at home, middle school is a great time to do that. And then that extends into high school, which is also just a complicated season of growth and development and so many big life choices. So I think that because of what kids are going through in those years, homeschooling is such a great option. Yeah.
The high school years are tough because everybody, if you've had a graduate, everybody asks them their senior year. And as you get closer to graduation, it's always what are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? And it's just the natural question to ask someone who's moving into the next phase of their life. Sure. But it's very stressful. At least I know it was for Brooklyn, where she was like, if one more person asks me that, I'm going to scream, please stop asking me. Yep. But it's a lot. It's a big burden for these kids to carry.
It is.
And so as their homeschool parents, if we have them home with us, we get to help direct and guide them. Again, looking, taking that bird's eye view and zooming out to look at, well, where do you want to go? And helping them figure out,
Right.
What next? And it could be a gap year you talked about, and talk about that for just a minute. Actually, you know what? We're out of time. So let's pause here and then let's come back tomorrow and let's talk about gap years? Because I know that your your two oldest took gap years. So I want to park on that just for a minute, but we'll come back and talk about that tomorrow. So for those who would like to find out more about you, again, tell them where they can find you and your new book, Becoming Homeschoolers.
Yes. MonicaSwanson.com is my home base for my book, my podcast, my courses, all the things I have.
Okay. Thank you so much, you guys, for listening. Stay tuned to the very end here, a clip of what's coming up tomorrow on the podcast. And if you've not left a review for the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast, please do so. We really appreciate it when you do that. And also, if you have not yet listened to my husband's new podcast, The Thinking Dad. It's so funny. We went to this homeschool conference recently, and there were a few moms who came up to my husband and said, "Oh, I've been listening to The Thinking Dad," and he's like, "That's awesome." And so it's geared, of course, towards dads, but apparently there are a bunch of moms listening to it too, which I absolutely love. And I listen to it, so it's great. I absolutely love it. I'm so encouraged by it. So it's called The Thinking Dad. You can find it wherever you find this podcast, or go to thinkingdad.com. We'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. Have a great day, and we will see you back here tomorrow. Bye.
Laughing in the face of imposter syndrome and coming to you from the epicenter of manly overconfidence, I'm your host, Yvette Hampton, and you are listening to The Thinking Dad.
Even if we're able to push the evildoers and the totalitarians back for another generation, maybe if we work really hard, maybe even 2 generations, if they've got the young people, it's over.
I often think about Daniel's parents, who you don't hear anything about. But they must have laid down the foundation for Daniel to be able to go into Babylon and not fall.
We're in that very beginning part of the cycle for tough times. We've been fat and happy. We've been enjoying we're lazy because we enjoy so much freedom. We got all these blessings, and why would you go do the hard work? And so for a long time now, decades, we haven't had to do the hard work. We've been living on the fumes of previous generations paying the price. And we got to raise the bar and say, I'm willing to give more of my life, that's my time, more of my money, of course, that's our fortune, and more of my sacred honor, which is my reputation. I'm willing to put it all on the line. Every single one of us has to be willing to do that.
Join us for the first season of The Thinking Dad at thinkingdad.net.
I think, like with all parts of parenting, you see so much clearer looking back. And I think back to the joyful times for a lot of just the regular days. And the treasures I had just in spending that sweet time over lunch with my boys, hearing them read a paper that they wrote that I wouldn't have probably witnessed if they were doing that somewhere else. Just so many of the sweet moments around the house doing life as a family. Now, that's probably mixed with the same challenges, which was there were 4 kids around the house all the time. And I do appreciate a little peace and quiet, and I rarely had that. But the joys and the challenges were all mixed, and now looking back, it's much more joy